Hi, welcome to the 360 podcast, an all-round look at student-centered education. I'm Adrian Pumphrey, and in this episode we got to catch up with renowned speaker and transformational educator, Principal Kafele of New Jersey. We speak to him about how best to empathize and relate to African American students, as well as how to identify our own conscious and subconscious biases. Enjoy the episode. Well, Principal Kafele, thank you so much for joining us on the 360 podcast.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation to us this morning. So much to think about, so many questions that could have come out of that. If you don't mind, the first place I know to start off with is my perspective. And as someone that's not even from America originally, right? So I sound different. I look different to a lot of my students. And I'm coming from a very different experience and context for them.
Yeah.
How is it that I can put myself in their shoes to understand where they're coming from in order to adapt my curriculum, instruction, the way I interact, my teaching and learning that happens in my room? Where do I start?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one of the most important places to start is beyond them. I'm going to make the assumption, because you've been here for a little while, that you know the history of the country. But then within that history of the country, you got to understand the history of your African American students in particular, right? You've got to know their history within that broader history. The history of the country is their history, but a lot of times it gets lost. So you've got to find it, because being with the youngster in 2019 without the context of his or her past, you don't really know that youngster.
Sure.
Right, but when you understand that context, when you understand what that history is, that foundation, if you will, it gives you broader understanding of who that youngster is, both as an individual and collectively.
Yeah, and sort of practically speaking on a day-to-day level, I'll have kids on Monday that are walking into my classroom. What do you think in terms of ways that I can relate things that I might not be thinking about right now that I can do on Monday?
In terms of the individual, it's the intentionality of the relationship that you forge with them. How intentional, I'm being rhetorical, how intentional are you about getting to know each individual within that classroom? See, as a teacher, I wanted to know them all. So one of the things that I did, I can get to know you to an extent in the classroom during instruction, but I can get to know you better outside of instruction. So I ate lunch with my students literally every day. I never read that anywhere. No one ever recommended it to me. It just seemed natural that these are my students. Why would I go somewhere in isolation from them at lunch when I can just go to the cafeteria, eat the same lunch I was going to eat in the teacher's lounge, but I can eat it with them? That way I can either interact with them or I can sit there quiet and listen and observe them. So now I'm watching them through a different lens, and I'm watching them engage in a different kind of conversation. Because in the classroom, theoretically, it's instructional conversation in a cooperative learning, student-centered learning environment. But in the cafeteria, they're talking about things of interest to them.
Right.
If I can create a culture within that space in the classroom where our teacher sits with us and it's okay, we can still be natural and have our conversations, then those kids are going to be natural within the conversation, and I'm there just observing, learning my kids. When I became a principal, most of my practices as a teacher I brought into the building, at the building level. So now I ate lunch at a table with students literally every day as a principal, because it enabled me, once again, because now I got more students, it enabled me to get to know them outside of the classroom. That's not the only place I got to know them, but that's one of them.
I'm thinking of sports games as well.
Yeah. Always at the whatever the extracurricular activity was, whether it be the athletics, whether it be the competition, the debates, whatever it was, I'm there. Right? So if we're on if it's a long school bus ride somewhere, instead of me driving and meeting them there, let me ride the bus with them.
Sure.
And now I can interact with them there, or again, just listen and observe and getting to know them. So whatever the excuses are, whatever those small openings are, let me exploit it so that I can make it advantageous for all of us.
How is your own educational experience as a student when you think about your younger self, when you were in high school and you were in middle school and elementary school? How do you feel like that has shaped your work now?
It's when I look back on it, obviously I have certain regrets about the mistakes that I made along the way. That's on a personal level. But then professionally, I say thank God for the mistakes, because professionally it enabled me to make my mission very personal. Because it said, my kids can grow up and make the same mistakes. My scholars can grow up and make the same mistakes I made. But if, on the other hand, because I know about those mistakes, I know about those traps, those pitfalls, now I know what I have to do to prevent them from making the same mistakes, right? Because I experienced a lot of what they're dealing with now. So it helped me professionally in a way that grad school could have never prepared me to be a school leader or even a teacher at the undergrad
Can
level.
you let us in on some of those secrets?
Yeah. We like my guys, for example, and the ones who are making those mistakes in the street, whether it be gangs, drugs, whatever. I devised a young men's empowerment program, which was not some after school, before school, Saturday add-on program. I said I want to make a program that's an inherent part of the day. So we said, let's focus on Mondays. We call Monday Power Monday. Let's make sure that youngster is coming to school in shirt and tie. Like, I'd be out of compliance right now if you don't have a tie on, right? And once we get beyond the symbolism of how we want them to look, now let's go to the substance. We went and tapped on the doors of men, so to speak, and we brought men in from all walks of life to talk to our boys about what it is to be a man as it relates to his own personal growth and development. What does it look like to be a man as it relates to the young ladies? Because we know that there are all these other competing challenges, particularly the lyrics of a lot of the music that they listen to. What does it look like to be a man in relationship to the child he may have one day? So that young man that may have a son or a daughter, what does fatherhood look like if he's not in the midst of being in a household with a father right now? Let's talk about that. What does it look like to be a man in relationship to his male peers, right? We know that anything can jump off with the youngsters. So we said, let's talk to them about that conflict resolution and how we resolve that peacefully. And lastly, what does it look like to be a young man in relationship to his community? Are you an asset to your community, or are you a liability? So that was a 4-year program. And while they were learning, when you become an 8th grader or when you become a senior in high school, now you are in that mentor role, and now the incoming students become your responsibility. So we're teaching you oratory, because you have to stand before a podium and talk to the class about what your expectations were and for them. And we're teaching you leadership, in addition to all the other components that I talked about that we share with them on a regular basis.
That program sounds amazing.
You used the operative word. It was amazing. I couldn't wait for Mondays to walk into the building, see my guys looking like me, and just pouring that information into them. We broke them down by grade level, so we'd have a different grade level every Monday morning.
So what is something that a classroom teacher could do? Like, what are ways that just a typical classroom teacher who's not leading an amazing program like that, how do we build and foster an equitable school culture, classroom culture?
On the one hand, the program served as a vehicle for that teacher to be able to do the things that teacher went to school to do, to teach.
Right.
But on the other hand, in terms of strategy for the teacher, I look at these 5 components. It's a framework comprised of the following 5 strands. I said, number 1, the environment for learning. Teacher, is that learning environment an environment of excellence? When youngsters walk into that room, what do they see, including in you? What do they hear? What do they feel emotionally? And what is the overall experience? Now, that's a whole conversation, but we're talking about what is it about that environment, that climate of the room. When you walk through that threshold, what do you feel that you have manipulated, that you have influenced, that you have some level of control over, as opposed to something that grows organically that may run counter to what it is that you want it to be. So that climate, which I call the mood of the room, and then that culture, which I call the lifestyle of the room, culminating into what they see, what they hear, what they feel, they experience. Teacher has influence over that. Number 2, the teacher's attitude towards students. If we're talking about black students, the teacher's attitude toward black students. Do I believe in them? Tweaked. What do I believe about them? That matters. That's a whole conversation. Tweaked again. What do I believe about myself as it relates to them? That's the teacher digging down, being honest with self about what baggage do I bring that I may need to purge so that I can make that connection. Strand number 3, relationship with students, which asks the question, do I know them? But if I tweak it, what do I know about you? What do I know about your experiences, your realities, your challenges, your obstacles, your needs, your interests, the way you learn, the way you think, the way you process information, your goals, your aspirations, what motivates you, what keeps you inspired over the long haul? What do I know as it relates to all those components? Strand 4, compassion for students. Do I care about you? Matter of fact, we go back to the relationship strand. What do I know about you? But now, what do I know about myself as it relates to you? What do I know? Do I know that I have what it takes to make that connection with you? That's that honest self-reflection, self-assessment that teacher has to endure every day, engage in every day. But then going back to compassion, do I care about you? But if I tweak that, do my students perceive that I care about you? That's a much more potent question than do I care? Because you and I, we can preach that we care about our students until we turn blue in the face. But the real question,
we could even think that we show it, and they not perceive it,
right? Because then we have the conversation with them,
right?
Which I do ever so often, when I'm invited to have small group discussions with kids, and the question comes up: do the teachers care about you? And in so many cases, kids say, "Man, they don't care about us," or certain teachers don't care about us. But the teacher had the perception, because then I go back and have the conversation with the teacher. The teacher had the perception that they do in fact care, right? So do they perceive that I care, and how do I know that they know that I care, right? And then lastly, relevance in instruction, which asks the question, do I even realize who my students are, and thereby create lessons that speak directly to them? Right. So as a presenter, presenters do an audience analysis, which I did this morning. No one knows I'm doing it, but that's what a good presenter is going to do. They're not going to just go in cold and just start talking to a group. They're going to analyze who's in that room. They're going to listen in on conversation. They're going to see how people sit. They're going to look at people's facial expressions. They're going to read their audience.
Right.
The same way a marketer is going to read a market before they begin to advertise a product. They're going to research that market. See what market can we target, and then target that audience in terms of our ads. Well, same thing with the speaker, but the same thing with the teacher. You have to know your audience. You can't just go in there and teach content because you got children. What do you know about them? Because you want to be relevant in your instruction, right? So do I know them? But then if I tweak the question, do they know themselves? See. You can have students of whatever ethnic group, in this case we're talking about black children, who may not be familiar with their own history and culture because they haven't been exposed to it. And that's almost a crime, right? We have to make sure that they are knowledgeable of their own history and culture so that they don't gravitate to something that just looks like them but is not representative of who they are historically and culturally speaking. So those 5 strands, those are things a teacher can do tomorrow. The environment, the attitude, the relationships, the compassion, the relevance in instruction.
If I could follow up on that, those 5 strands sound amazing, and things I could base a whole career on. And I also think that I could reflect on those for all of my students. What I'd love to know is what is unique about those 5 strands when it comes to African American students? Because
of the intentionality of targeting them. Let's key in on the attitude towards students, right? So it's one thing to say I have a particular attitude about my students, but it's another thing to have that very honest conversation with self and ask oneself, but what are my perceptions? as it relates to my black boys, based on what I've seen in the media, what I've seen in just in my walk. Am I clouded in my thinking at all? Is anything tainted? And am I seeing my black boys as less than, right? Like those could be questions that a teacher hasn't even dealt with internally, right? So I don't realize the bias that I may be bringing, right? Whether it be explicit, whether it be implicit, whether it be unconscious, right? That I may be bringing biases into my classroom, and I don't even realize it, right? I'm setting my bar here, and I'm rewarding my black, just use him as an example. My black boy, he got a C, and I'm praising him. Where if he's coming from a D or an F, then the praise is warranted. But I've stopped there, as opposed to using that as a plateau, a benchmark, till I bring that youngster to that level of an A plus, right? So maybe I'm bringing a bias, and I'm saying the C is good, it's acceptable. No, it's just a step. But in order for me to get to the top, I got to walk each step, or at least to the point where I can jump a couple of steps to ultimately get to that top step.
And what is a good way to reflect on those biases? Like I'm thinking like, I want to leave this, and I immediately want to think about what biases I'm bringing into the classroom. Are there some good practical tips on reflecting on and bringing those out?
Absolutely, and one of the best ones is through thought partnership. So here you've got a thought partner. You've got some professional that you can be brutally honest with, and vice versa. So that person can be brutally honest with you. So a variety of topics you guys can share. If this person's in the building and can observe you in action, teaching or leading, if it's a leader. But if this person's not, just on the basis of the relationship, I can be brutally honest about the things I did, the things I said, and get feedback from this person about how they feel. So perhaps, let's say, for example, your thought partner's not in the building, but you're bouncing off of this person something you said today, or some thought you had as it relates to those students. What do you think? On the basis of the relationship, that person might say it's detrimental, right? It's destroying that kid. Because it's clear, just on what you said, that your expectations, the bar you set for that youngster is so low. It's like low fruit, right? This kid will reach that easily. You gotta raise your bar. But you had that person who that thought partner becomes your human mirror. So you can look at this person and you're getting your own reflection from the conversation with that individual.
That's a great idea.
A group of the teachers here have read Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility. I don't know if you're familiar.
I'm familiar with the book, but I haven't read it. But I know what it's about.
Toward the end of those sort of her final chapters, she writes quite a bit about the importance of learning how to accept that kind of feedback, and what do you do when you get that kind of feedback of you might not see yourself. You might not see yourself clearly and how your actions or words or behaviors are coming off, but when somebody, a thought partner, kind of holds up that mirror and sort of shows you what's going on, how do you accept it? Because that can be really difficult for people. Do you have any tips?
Well, I mean, it's just it's putting one's politics to the side, and it's having that open mind, like. It's interesting. I always wish I could have certain conversations with flight attendants, but the time doesn't warrant. Here's what I mean. You see, I'm dressed right now. So I'm dressed professionally. But yesterday I came from home, so I was in jeans. Now I'm not going to name the airline because it's being recorded. But I have elite status with it. Well, it doesn't matter there. It could be any airline. I have elite status with this particular airline because I fly it. So I do 100,000 miles a year. And therefore, I've got these perks. But when I walk onto the plane with my jeans, my boots, or my sneakers, my t-shirt or hoodie, whatever it is, my baseball cap, it's a rare day that they will say hello to me. Right, I'll notice them saying, and one of the things, a big observation for me is there's not a lot of black flyers, right? It's typically I'm the only one on the plane, except if I'm going like in the deep south, right? There's not a lot of black flyers. So when I get on the plane, I'm in a plane full of white and Asian flyers, right? And I won't be acknowledged when I walk on. I'm like, man, I got this elite status. But in my mind, I'm saying, but wait until they review the manifest, and then they have to come to my seat and offer me those perks that everyone's not getting. And then I look at them, and every now and then I'll say, you weren't this friendly when I walked on the plane. I don't do that often. But now today, when I get on the plane, I'll have this on. I promise you, they will all speak when I get on the plane today. The difference, I'm the same guy. I'm the same Principal Kafele that's doing the work that I do, making the money that I make, but I'll have my suit on. I'll wear a sport coat and slacks. And all of them will say hi to me. I promise you. That's an observation that I've had for all the years I've been doing this work as a self-employed consultant for the past 9 years now. That they're gonna speak when I got on the suit, and they're not gonna speak when I don't, right? And it speaks to the bias, because in my mind you're judging me on my appearance instead of just accepting me for who I am when I walk onto that plane, right? And I have those experiences. They transfer to other categories of activities. It's the same stuff, you know. As a matter of fact, it's even in the business of speaking, right? It's there as well. There's certain places, like I'll give you this example. I did a presentation somewhere where they asked me to specifically speak about diversity because we're having issues. Okay, fine. So I didn't have to warm up my audience to get to it because they said this is what we want. Like a lot, because I was saying during the presentation, a lot of times I'll spend time just kind of building up to it before I get heavy into that kind of content. So when I set up, I said, for those of you who are unfamiliar with me, like you've never heard of me before, I want you to participate in this line of questioning. Those of you that know me, please be silent. I said, when you saw me walk in and you knew I was the presenter and you saw me setting up, I said, who did you see? What did you see? This was in a particular school, which I won't mention. Did you see a presenter? Or did you see an African-American presenter? And the room went very quiet. I said, come on, who'd you see? And I had to beg. Finally, a teacher said, I saw an African-American. Someone else, African-American. Someone else, African-American. Anyone else, African-American. Okay, fine. That's it. Now, I said to myself, let me name a white presenter that I know they'll all know. And I just happened to have dinner with this presenter the other day, and I told him that I do this, and he says, no problem. I said, if he walked into the room, I said, you all know this guy? He said, yeah. If he walked into the room, would you see a white presenter or a presenter? They got quiet. Come on, tell me. Somebody in here, tell me. Presenter. Someone else. Presenter. Someone else. Presenter. Okay, let's talk about this now. I have no problem with you seeing African Americans. I'm proud of what I am. But why are you seeing that? Why can't I just be presenter? And as we got into discussion, because we don't see a lot of you. We see the white presenter. So is it fair to say, I'm saying to them, that the white presenter is the norm and I'm the aberration? Yeah, I guess you could put it that way. I said, see, I don't want to be an aberration. I want to walk into the room and you see the presenter. Right? So now they had to deal with that. Like, wow, I never thought about that before. I got to deal with my own biases in that regard. But as we explored deeper, you know, like I said, I was the first one for a lot. They had seen particularly a black man as opposed to a woman. They had seen video footage of people, but seeing this black man, but not just a black man in a suit, but a black man in authority. And in this case, I don't want to use the word over, but with them. I'm the presenter, I'm the teacher. I'm the guy that's in charge. Mm-hmm. That wasn't normal for a lot of people in the room. So imagine now, if you've got biases, and now here comes this black guy, and he's the one that's going to be instructing me for the next 6 hours. I don't know that world. According to, with that, it's something very different from me. And they got to deal with that internally, like, man, because I'm used to something else. I'm used to the football player, the basketball player, the rapper, the whatever. And here's this smart guy, he speaks well, in a suit, and he's teaching me to be better at what I do. That's very, very different. See, for me, the inverse, I'm used to having white authority teaching me something new because that's normal. Well, I want to make what I do normal in their eyes.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I know that in the most recent book it was the Aspiring
Principal 50.
The Aspiring Principal 50, as I was looking at that, and I watched a little bit of one of your videos, and that you clearly are bringing a lot to the table in terms of cultural competence and race relations, but that you're also helping people just, if you're thinking about, trying your hand at being an administrator, let me just give you some straight advice. It doesn't matter, you know what I mean? I mean that you bring a broad range of expertise to the table, and I appreciate that.
When I came into this business, I wanted to really focus on teachers of black children. But then as time went on, I said, but that's not all I have.
Right.
And I had to go to my publisher with that. I said, look, I got more to offer. I have information to offer to educators. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to be pigeonholed into one genre. I mean, invite me for that genre because I want to do that work, but don't limit me to it. Don't have the big conference and say I'm not qualified to speak at the big conference that doesn't have a black theme. I'm qualified for that conference too.
Well, I have to be the bad guy and bring this conversation. So I have about 4 hours more of questions. But I know we can check out your website. That'll be on the show notes. So I encourage listeners to go there. But thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
That was Principal Baruti Kafele, award-winning educator and transformational speaker. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Do join us again.